got some word yesterday that was pretty darn positive. Michael Flynn, former national security advisor for President Trump, who had been unjustly, and I think a case can strongly be made illegally, surveilled and investigated by the Obama administration and then still by the FBI even after President Obama left office, it seems. He was vindicated, Flynndicated, shall we say, in essence, by an appeals court yesterday that ruled in his favor. That is saying the case should indeed be dismissed, the case against him, that Judge Emmett Sullivan, lower court judge, district judge, had been trying to drag on, I think, inappropriately. Let's dive in to this very topic of conversation today, get a good sense for what's going on with this Michael Flynn case, where things are at, how we got here, with Max McGuire, who is advocacy director at conservative-daily.com and the host of the Conservative Daily podcast on YouTube, Facebook, and all your favorite podcast locations. Max rejoins us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. My friend, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you, as always. So this is pretty big yesterday. I've got some sound I want to play and whatnot, but just kind of fill us in on what's going on here. What do we know now?
Sure. So as you know, the Trump administration had petitioned to basically drop the case, saying that Michael Flynn never should have been prosecuted, never should have gotten as far as it did. So they basically made a motion to withdraw the charges. The judge in the case didn't want to do that. So the judge hired another judge to argue that it should keep going. They took it all the way to the appeals court, and the appeals court ruled yesterday 2-1 that no, if the government drops the case and the accused wants to recant their guilty plea, you can't just keep prosecuting them, and you can't hire some outside attorney and judge to prosecute the case on the government's behalf. It's very obvious. If the government doesn't want to prosecute you for something, a judge isn't allowed to go hire someone else to stand in as the government. It's a very basic thing that shouldn't have even been in question. But the interesting thing is that the judge in this case, he actually sent a motion, a request back to the appeals court, because typically appeals court rulings don't go into full effect till I think it's 21 days after they're signed, because that gives other appeals court judges time to review it and see if they want to request an en banc hearing. So technically it isn't in full effect. So we're already seeing the judge in this case trying to weasel his way in to see if he can keep this going a little longer. It's pretty shameful.
It's so transparent that Judge Sullivan is trying to do everything he can to keep Michael Flynn from being permanently set free and able to go live his life. It's like there's a vendetta going on here when you literally hire a third-party guy, a former judge, to step in. You know you're not being fair and impartial as the Constitution requires.
Yeah, no, it's Judge Sullivan. He was the guy who, one day after, I think it was Rachel Maddow called Flynn a traitor and accused him of treason, the very next day from the bench, Judge Sullivan repeated those talking points out of nowhere, accused Michael Flynn of treason, which was not something that the government was even arguing. So this guy obviously is a partisan. He doesn't like, I can understand the argument that he doesn't like his time being wasted. I don't think anyone likes their time being wasted, but you can't do this. And the fact that you can't just say like, oh no, I think he should still be prosecuted, even though no one wants to prosecute the case. I'm going to hire someone else to do it for you. You just can't do that. We don't live in that kind of society. That's what you see in like Soviet Russia or other dictatorships. You don't see that here, and there's a reason for that.
Well, yeah, Max McGuire, I mean, it's basically like the judge decided, I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure this case continues to be prosecuted in the way that I want to, and that's not the role of a judge. A judge is supposed to adjudicate these kinds of things, not get involved in deciding the direction that they will go through the proceedings and what arguments are actually on a basic level. I mean, sure, he can dismiss certain things and say, no, you're not allowed to enter this evidence, or you're not allowed to make this particular argument because it's not based on this or that. That's not at all what he's doing here, but I want to play something that was pretty exciting yesterday in Cut 4. Michael Flynn himself called in to Rush Limbaugh's show yesterday and expressed some enthusiasm. And I just want to give a taste because I feel so badly for how he's been treated and so pleased with this outcome. But I just hope that it really manifests itself in the end in a complete Flynndication and that it's not, there's no legal mumbo jumbo that turns things around. But take a listen here.
And, obviously the fight's not over, as you've been highlighting for not just today, but for a long time.
Right.
And what the decision today is really, it's a good thing for General Flynn. It's a good thing for me. It's a good thing for my family. But it's really a great boost of confidence for the American people in our justice system, because that's what this really comes down to, is whether or not our justice system is going to have the confidence of the American people in it. And boy,
well,
and your listeners know this.
You had to have your doubts in it for the longest time. I can't imagine what it's been like.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll maybe there'll be another time that we can get into the details of it, but I will just tell you that I have always believed and fought for our rule of law. The most important thing that we have in this country, bar none, is that. And we have to make it work, whether we like it or not, and it has to work with the right people and the right leaders.
It's so encouraging just to hear Max McGuire, again, host of the Conservative Daily podcast. It's so encouraging to hear Michael Flynn be able to express that kind of well-earned, well-deserved enthusiasm after years of being put through the ringer unjustly.
Yeah, it is. It was funny as I'm listening to that. When I first heard that he was coming on, I thought maybe it's his son, since he referred to himself in the third person, as this is a great thing for General Flynn.
And then he said me. He said me.
Yeah, and then he said me. So I guess when you've been through what he's been through, you're allowed to refer to yourself in the third person. I'll give him a pass on that. But he's absolutely right. And one of the hallmarks of our judicial system is when you're accused of a crime, you have the right to be given all of the evidence against you. Not only evidence against you, but evidence that could prove your innocence. The government's supposed to already have weighed that. But if the government charges you with the crime, you're supposed to get everything. And one of the most egregious parts of this whole process is to see how the evidence that the government has against Flynn and proving his innocence wasn't given to him. It's had to be trickled out slowly as Flynn and his legal team have filed motions demanding its release. So it's pretty scummy that this happened to him, because if he had the documents that we've seen released yesterday and the past couple weeks, if he had them at the time that he pled guilty, he probably wouldn't have pled guilty, because these were exculpatory documents that proved, or at least suggested, his innocence that he could have been able to use to his advantage. So that's what I think is the biggest takeaway. Yeah, you had crazy people in the FBI and DOJ trying to go after him, but you also had this hiding of evidence to stop him from actually mounting a legal defense.
Now, then we learned something pretty stunning yesterday as well, which is Joe Biden and Barack Obama apparently knew more about the Flynn investigation than anybody was trying to let on with the release. In pick one, we've got these notes that were uncovered that I'm so stunned that they actually are saying, we didn't really know that much. We weren't paying attention. This wasn't our thing, so on and so forth. But Max McGuire, what these notes, and I'm trying to find where I have the transcript here in front of me, but I know you know it well. Can you summarize it for us? What was saying? What it said?
Yeah, sure. So it's chicken scratch, but these are handwritten notes that were written by Peter Strzok, who was that FBI lovebird. Not only did he let Hillary Clinton off the hook, but he's the one who launched the whole Trump investigation. He was the one having an affair with Lisa Page, basically saying we're going to defeat Trump by any means necessary. He's writing down these notes, relaying what's being told to him by James Comey himself. James Comey was in the room, Strzok wasn't. So Comey's telling Strzok what happened, and Strzok in real time is writing these chicken scratch notes just for his own memory to be able to recall what Comey told him. And so they're talking about the Flynn calls. They're asking whether there are other countries involved. And then you have Comey and Yates saying that we should lean forward on something unclassed. Don't know what that means. But then you have Biden. Biden is being mentioned as bringing up the Logan Act, which is a law that was passed in 1799, which makes it a federal crime for a civilian to negotiate with a foreign country on the United States' behalf. Now, that law has never been successfully prosecuted, not once, because it is unconstitutional. You have a First Amendment right to free speech. You cannot criminalize that speech because you're talking to a foreign government official. So it's never been prosecuted. And yet Joe Biden, we now know from these notes that Joe Biden is the one who brought it up. And then President Obama says, well, these are unusual times, almost as if he's setting the pretext for all this, that this is unusual, but these are unusual times. We have every right to do this. Then Biden says, I've been on the Intel committee for 10 years and I presume he says, I never saw anything like this. And then Obama says, and this is one of the key parts, make sure you look at things and have the right people on it. And then he asks, is there anything I shouldn't be telling the transition team? And Comey says, the Flynn and Kislyak calls appear legit. And then they say something about Happy New Year and yeah, right. So these notes are very important because up until this point, we knew from Sally Yates, when Sally Yates, she was the Deputy Attorney General under Obama. And her testimony, we know from her testimony and the interview she gave with FBI investigators that she pegged Comey as the one who brought up the Logan Act. Comey denied it. He said someone else in the room brought up the Logan Act. Now from these notes, which aren't Comey's notes, but it's Comey retelling the story to another FBI employee, these notes show us that, at least according to Comey, it was Joe Biden who brought up the Logan Act. And it was Obama who said, look into this.
Wait.
And make sure you put the right people on it.
Hold up. Get me back on the screen, Nathan Matoush, because I'm going to object. I'm going to object here to what Max was just saying. There's no way Biden said that. He told George Stephanopoulos in Cut 2, a couple of months ago, that he didn't know more than that this investigation was underway.
I do want to ask you about Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor to President Trump, and the move by the Justice Department last week to dismiss the case against him for lying to the FBI. The president said yesterday that move is justified because President Obama targeted Flynn. He called it, quote, the biggest political crime in U.S. history. Your former Senate colleague Charles Grassley has added that Flynn was entrapped and asked on the Senate floor, what did Obama and Biden know? When did they know it? So what did you know about those moves to investigate Michael Flynn, and was there anything improper done?
I know nothing about those moves to investigate Michael Flynn, number one. Number two, this is all about diversion.
I do want to press that. You say you didn't know anything about it, but you were reported to be at a January 5th, 2017 meeting where you and the president were briefed on the FBI's plan to question Michael Flynn over those conversations he had with the Russian ambassador Kislyak.
Now, I thought you asked me whether or not I had anything to do with him being prosecuted.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I was aware that they asked for an investigation, but that's all I know about it, and I don't think anything else.
Max, Joe Biden, he assured us he was only aware that there was an investigation. That's it.
Yeah, no, he's a liar. He's a liar, but most likely he actually doesn't remember. I mean, I don't think Joe Biden remembers what he ate for breakfast yesterday.
It's probably true.
So in fairness, he might just not remember. But then again, when someone commits treason, you'd think that maybe it gets stored in their long-term memory. No, this is a complete lie. And even Joe Biden's apology was a lie too. He said, I knew that they asked for the investigation. These notes show that the Deputy Attorney General and Comey were in the room, but it wasn't they that asked for the investigation. It was Obama that said, look into this and make sure you put the right people on it. And it was Joe Biden that recommended this track looking into Logan Act violations. So it's a complete lie. It's funny when Donald Trump brings this up and he says that Barack Obama and Joe Biden may have committed treason. The mainstream media runs the comment and then says, but Trump provided no evidence. You have to be hiding under a rock to be able to write that headline or to want to deliberately mislead people. This is the president of the United States ordering an investigation into an incoming administration, and it's the vice president of the United States who, as we've talked about on the show before, doesn't actually have any power. The vice president, other than breaking a tie in the Senate, the only thing he's there for is if the president becomes incapacitated. But the vice president is recommending that the Justice Department look into a 1799 law that has never successfully been prosecuted. We want to talk about independence in investigations. The vice president has no business recommending that the DOJ and FBI investigate someone on a 1799 crime. There's no legitimate reason for it.
Well, but Max McGuire, let me add this point too, which is recall that John Kerry had been doing, I think, under this current president, Donald Trump. The former Secretary of State, John Kerry, was literally going over and trying to negotiate with Iran. And that was not where he was incoming into an administration. Keep in mind, when this was happening, Michael Flynn was being investigated by the FBI. He was the incoming national security advisor, having conversations that were particularly reasonable for an incoming national security advisor to have with a foreign government, as opposed to John Kerry, who was a former Secretary of State. Max McGuire.
Yeah, I understand that makes sense. The challenge is that everyone has a free speech right. You have the right to talk to someone without that speech being criminalized. Obviously, unless you are delivering some kind of direct call to violence, you have the right to speak your mind, and it's not criminal if you speak your mind to a foreign power. Where John Kerry gets into serious trouble is that he wasn't just talking to a foreign power; he was giving aid and comfort to the enemy. Right? We're not just talking about his speech being criminalized. He was telling Iran, don't negotiate with Trump, because if Trump loses, you'll have Democrats in power and it'll be better off for you. That's giving aid and comfort to the enemy, which, as long as you have a couple witnesses, that can be prosecuted as treason. So there is a little bit of a difference there. And you're right, between an incoming administration and someone who hasn't been in government for years. But yeah, no, Kerry has a lot more to worry about than Flynn ever did.
Yeah. Again, Max McGuire, our guest, advocacy director, conservative-daily.com, and host of the Conservative Daily podcast. Let's go to cut 5 here. This is Sidney Powell, who is Michael Flynn's lawyer, talking about the whole Biden wrinkle to this story.
It is absolutely terrifying, Lou, to think that this would go on in the United States of America. And these notes are simply damning, whether it was a phone conversation or a meeting or how it was conducted. The notes are clear in raising significant issues for Vice President Biden and, of course, Mr. Obama and their role in orchestrating and instructing and making sure this entire operation was carried out. It's just terrific.
And to suggest that, as the president did, no, just not to suggest, he said straight out, be sure the right people are on this case. I'm not sure what that means. Do you have any idea? Because frankly, it sounds rather sinister.
It does. I think really that's the only way to take it, is he's saying, make sure that people who are going to carry through into the next administration are on it, people that Mr. Comey and Mr. Obama could trust to make it come out the right way. I mean, there's really no reason for them to be having this conversation in the first place. It simply shouldn't have happened.
I have to say, Sidney Powell is a class act. She's done a phenomenal job. Yeah. I mean, she was dealt a very difficult hand in the sense of having to do so much investigatory work on her own and with her own folks, as opposed to having the FBI actually do its job responsibly.
Yeah, no, she's absolutely right. And the way you know that Obama wasn't meaning that to be like, make sure you have someone impartial, make sure you have someone fair, because these notes show that immediately after the meeting, James Comey delegated that responsibility to Peter Strzok. Peter Strzok, the guy who literally, we have text messages basically saying that they went to a Walmart in Virginia and he could smell the Trump support in the air. Right? That's the kind of people. So you can't argue that they delegated it to the fair-minded people in the FBI, because these notes show that it was being delegated to Peter Strzok, the most partisan of them all.
I could go into Whole Foods and smell the Hillary support back in 2016. So, Max McGuire, one thing that I think is important to kind of get out there is President Trump and his reaction and how he's looking at all of these kinds of things, whether it's Flynn, but also just the mere fact that you had the FBI investigating a candidate for president of the United States, and then the guy who was actually elected president of the United States. Let's go to cut 3. This is President Donald Trump talking about how his campaign was being spied upon.
On Obama and the spying situation, this idea that they were spying on your campaign, you've been asked before about what crime he would have potentially committed. But I remember you talking to
treason. Treason.
That's what I was going to ask.
It's treason. Look, When I came out a long time ago, I said, they've been spying on my campaign. I said, they've been taping, and that was in quotes, meaning a modern-day version of taping. It's all the same thing, but a modern-day version. But they've been spying on my campaign. I told you that a long time ago. Turned out I was right. Let's see what happens to him now. Durham is... I never met Durham because I want to stay out of it because otherwise it's going to look political. But Durham, as you know, is a highly respected person. And Bill Barr is doing a great job as Attorney General. Let's see what they come up with. But they don't have to tell me. All I have to do is read the papers, the insurance policy. In case she doesn't win, we got an insurance policy. Well, that was all the stuff that we went through over the last, let's say, 2.5 years. Now we caught them. We caught them called Strzok and Page, the two lovers. Brennan and Clapper, the way they lie.
As we wrap up with you, Max McGuire, I want your reaction to that, and especially because this is what we're talking about with Michael Flynn is part of a much bigger tapestry of events investigating President Trump's campaign in 2016 and even after during the transition time period. Now, I think treason's a bit much for the president to throw out that word. I wouldn't if I were him. But other than that, he was pretty much on point.
Yeah, treason is tough because treason has two legal definitions, either taking up arms against the United States or, as I mentioned before, giving aid and comfort to the enemy, which probably wouldn't apply in this scenario. But you could easily turn to a statute like 18 U.S.C. Section 242, which is deprivation of rights under color of law, colloquially known as abuse of power. The idea that someone is abusing their power in government and to create an investigation that they act like it's legitimate, but it has illegitimate reasons, right? So there's no way to argue that through this whole ordeal that Michael Flynn didn't have his rights violated. The rights were violated under the pretext of it being a legitimate investigation, but we know now that it went all the way to the top, that this was a witch hunt, this was a sham investigation from the start. So the real question is not whether he had his rights violated. It's not whether 18 U.S.C. Section 242 was violated. The question is, who are they going to be able to pin that crime on? And the fact that we have these notes now that go all the way up to Obama and Biden themselves. Listen, I don't know if you're going to get Biden thrown in handcuffs, but it's going to be really hard to argue that the White House wasn't involved when they're the ones egging on and actually ordering the investigation.
Yeah, I would be surprised if Joe Biden gets put into handcuffs over this. But, crazy things happen in the year 2020, so you never know what might take place. Max McGuire, about to go live at Conservative Daily on the podcast. It was great being on your show yesterday as well, so kind of a show swap this week.
Yeah, it was fun. When we go live at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So you can find us on facebook.com/Conservative Daily, all one word.
And we're going to get that link into the podcast description coming up here in a bit. So Max McGuire, thanks for joining us, my friend, and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, you too.
Once again, Max McGuire, host of the Conservative Daily podcast, joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Thanks for watching this clip of Jimmy at the Crossroads. Don't miss more engaging, intelligent talk. Subscribe today to the Jimmy at the Crossroads YouTube channel. You do not want to miss our live show. Thanks for your support.
I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of no sense. Yeah.